Hello, everyone. This is Sam Zakarian again with the Chicago Real Estate School. Today's session is going to be on Chapter 7. Chapter 7 deals with appraisal. So, if you go to your 10th edition, we're going to start off on page 89. Now, again, just want to remind you that anything I ask you to highlight, make sure you do that. Anything you put an X by, also do that too. Get ready to write things down, copy whatever I put in or screenshot anything I put down on a chalkboard. And if you have any questions, you can always talk to your instructor or you can contact the school at support@realestateschoolchicago.com. All right, now let's get started. Page 89 of our 10th edition, Chapter 7, we're talking about appraisals. Now, on page 89, the first 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, they're really only 1 or 2 lines each. I like you to highlight, put an X by them. Let me read what it says in here. An appraisal is a opinion of value based on supportable evidence and approved methods. Now, a real estate appraisal report is a opinion of market value on a property given to the lender or the client with detailed, accurate information. Now, an appraiser is a independent person trained to provide a unbiased opinion of the value. Now, let's say an appraiser came out to see your property this morning and they appraise your property. The appraisal doesn't hold true unless there's no change at all. I mean, like the appraiser can pull away, get a block away from your house, it can blow up or burn down. It doesn't change. As long as nothing else changed, the appraisal will hold true. Now, let's go on to page 90. 3rd paragraph down, where it says real estate broker competitive market analysis. Like it to highlight, put an X by that one, and there's 3 bullets underneath. You can highlight, put an X by that. Let me explain what we do as licensed real estate agents. We help a seller determine the value of the property by doing a competitive market analysis. It's not an appraisal. In order to do an appraisal, you have to be licensed and certified as an appraiser. So what we do to help a seller determine the value of the property, our market analysis, we call it a CMA, competitive market analysis. It's broken down into 4 parts. I call them ACEs. The A stands for active properties, meaning if someone's going to come out and take a look at your home or your condo, they're going to look at other condos in this building. They're going to look at other homes in that area as well. It's your competition is what it is. The C stands for contract pending. Now, contract pending is a property that was on the market and is sold. Hasn't closed yet, but the contract pending allows us to determine how long a property's on the market before it actually sells. The next one is expired listing. Now, an expired listing was a property that was on the market and did not sell. Well, guess what? There's only 2 reasons why a property doesn't sell: price and exposure. See, price could overcome anything. Price could overcome the condition if there's high interest rates, the location of the property. But no one knows it. You need that exposure. You're not going to be able to sell it. But what carries the most weight is sold. Sold tells us what people are willing to pay for a property similar to yours. Now, when an appraiser goes out to appraise a property, they don't care about the actives, the contract pendings, or the expires. All they care about are the sold properties. They use 3 to 5 what we call comparables or comps. They want properties that are from the same condo building or the same neighborhood, same area. And they also like property that's sold in the last 6 months. They want recent sales. Now, will they go out of the area or maybe a different building, condo building? If there's not enough comparables, yes, they will. Will they go beyond 6 months? They try not to, but if they have to, they will. Now, The very next paragraph, broker price opinion, BPO, we call that. You can highlight, put an X by that. We call that a drive-by appraisals because an appraisal costs quite a bit of money, maybe around $800 on the average for an appraisal for residential. Commercial costs a lot more. So what the situation is that sometimes when there's a property in distress, it's going to become a short sale foreclosure. The bank doesn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on appraisal, so they do a BPO, broker price opinion. This is when the appraiser pulls up to the property. They don't even get out of the car. They roll down the window, take a picture, and they try to determine the value of it. It's not very accurate because they have no idea about the condition on the inside of the property. So, but that's what they do sometimes. Now, value, like in a highlight, put X by those two lines, and highlight, put an X by 1, 2, 3, and 4. To have value in the real estate market, to have monetary worth based on desirability, a property must have the following 4 characteristics. We use the acronym DUST to help you remember that by. The D stands for demand. Demand means that someone wants the property, but not only do they want the property, they could afford to buy the property. The next one is utility, that there has to be a usefulness of that property. The next one is scarcity. Land is scarce. I mentioned that early. 71% of the earth is covered by water. The land that's left over, you can't do anything with it. And on top of page 91, the last one is called transferability. You must be able to transfer whatever interest you have in that property over to someone else. Now, highlight, put an X by that next paragraph. Market value. Market value of real estate is the most probable price that the property will bring in a arm's length transaction, as they call it, meaning both the buyer and the seller are informed, they know the value of the property, they're working in their own best interest. A buyer's not going to go up to a seller and says, you know, Mr. Seller, you're really, really a nice person, and I tell you what, I'm going to give you 50,000 more for the property. Or someone that's going through a foreclosure, distressed sale, that is not a market value, open market value, arm's length transaction. In the middle of the page, we have market value versus price. Highlight, put an X by the 3-line paragraph. Now, market value versus price. Now, let's say that you're the seller of the property. You feel that your property, your home, has the current market value of $450,000. And someone comes up to you and gives you an offer. They give you an offer, let's say, of $425,000, and you accept a $425,000. Now you feel that your property has a current market value of $450,000. Let me tell you what your property's worth. Your property's worth exactly what someone's willing to pay you and what you're willing to accept, which could be market value, could be above market value, could be less than market value. Next paragraph, market value versus cost. Highlight, put an X by that one. Now, what the buyer paid for that property originally has nothing to do with the value today. Maybe they bought their property 30 years ago. They paid $50,000 for it 30 years ago. That has nothing to do with the value today. People, a lot of times, buyers say, well, what do they pay for the property? It doesn't matter what they pay for the property. This is what the value is today. Now, at the very bottom here of page 91, we have what's called basic principles of value. On the next couple of pages, we have a dozen or so principles of value. Now, I'm going to go over all of them. Some of them I'm going to have you put an X by because they show up a little bit more often than others. So the first one at the very bottom of page 91, highlight, put an X by that. This is called the principle of anticipation, which means that people buy property in anticipation that the value of that property is going to go up. People buy property in anticipation that when they retire, they're going to sell this property. It's going to help pay for their retirement. That's the principle of anticipation. Well, let's go on to page 92, the principle of change. Well, the only thing that does not change in the real estate market is change. We are always in a constant state of change. I mean, the market's not the same as it was 3 years ago. It's not the same as it was a year ago, not the same as it was 3 months ago. Things are always changing. Next paragraph, can highlight that talks about competition. See, profit breeds competition. Excess profit breeds ruinous competition, meaning that, let's say a developer buys some land and he starts building a bunch of homes and they're all selling right away. So then what happens? Other developers start buying land out there. They all start building homes. Now we have too many homes, not enough properties, and that's going to bring the prices down. The principle of conformity. You can put an X by that one. Under the principle of conformity, it says properties is in harmony with its surrounding property, the value. Meaning this, that if you own, let's say you own a single family home. It has 5 rooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. You happen to be surrounded by homes that are 12 rooms, 5 bedrooms, 4 baths. Your property's worth a lot less money for that. It's not in harmony with its surroundings. You would need to add bedrooms. You would need to add bathrooms. Next is the principle of contribution. That one I want you to put an X by as well. Under the principle of contribution, it says the value of any part of the property is measured on the value of the whole. Meaning this, people make improvements to the property, but then what they do is they spend way too much making an improvement and it doesn't add any value to the property. For example, let's say that we all live in the same neighborhood, all of us, all the students here, myself, and the average home is selling for 450,000. And it was time for us to update our kitchens. Let's say all of you spent maybe 40, 50,000 putting in a new kitchen. But not me. I go out and I spend $250,000 putting in a new kitchen. Now, if I was to sell my home, now remember, we all have the same size square footage, same size rooms. We all have new kitchens, but you spent 40 to 50,000. I spent 250,000. If the average home is selling for 450, what am I going to get for my home? About 450. I'm not going to get 600,000 or 700,000. I over improved my property. We all have new kitchens. Doesn't matter. People tend to make big mistakes that way. Highest and best use. You could put an X by that one. The most profitable single use for which a property may be put, or the demand that's going to be in the near future, is the property's highest and best use. Let's say, for example, I own 5 acres of land that's located in a industrial zone area. The highest and best use for that one will be for me to build a factory, build a warehouse, not a single family home. Now, the last paragraph, you can highlight, put an X by that one. We call that increasing and diminishing returns. Increasing and diminishing returns. So, let me clear this a little bit. Given a certain amount of money and a certain amount of land, I can increase the value of my property up to a certain point, but any more additions to it can actually lower the value of the property. Just give me a second. Let me finish erasing over here, and I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Something that I talked about a little, real briefly, just a little bit ago. But I live in a home, and what I have, I own a 3-bedroom home. But I happen to be surrounded by 5-bedroom homes. Well, my home is worth a lot less money, but I have money and I have extra land. So what I did is I added a bedroom. Spending that money to add a bedroom to increase my home size to a 4-bedroom home, it does make it more valuable, but I'm still not as valuable as the other properties in the area because they still have a 5-bedroom home. So I have some extra money and extra land and I added another bedroom. Now I have a 5-bedroom home. By doing that, now I make my home worth as much as everybody else in the area. But you know what? I still have extra money, extra land, and I keep adding bedrooms. I go from 5 to 6 bedrooms, then I go from 6 to 7 bedrooms. I keep increasing it. Maybe I keep adding and adding. Now I have 12 bedrooms. Well, there's no demand for a 12-bedroom home. Given a certain amount of money and a certain amount of land, you can make improvements to your property and it will increase the value of your property up to a certain point. This will increase. This might slightly increase, but beyond that, it starts losing value. Keep going on. All right, let's go to page 92 next. Continuing with this, plottage. You can highlight that one. Plottage means if I have 20 home sites next to each other on the same block, I can make more money selling those 20 lots to the same developer, as opposed to if I have 20 single-family home lots scattered throughout the city of Chicago. I mean, to kind of trying to build 20 job sites scattered throughout the city and meeting with the inspectors and the workers and making sure your supplies are being delivered becomes a nightmare. See, having 20 home sites on the same block, the cost per home decreases the more homes you build on there. Next is highlight products by regression and progression. Regression and progression. So I think I'm going to start off with, let me think now. What am I going to do first? Let me just clear this out a little bit here. I am going to do progression first. Now let's take this neighborhood right here. I'm going to draw this. Here's a little neighborhood. By the way, this is called progression. So in this particular neighborhood, these are the house lots. And what we have here, we have several homes. Here I have a home that's worth, say, 750,000. I have another one that's worth 760 over here. There's one that's worth 770. Another one for 755. Another one for 765. 765 over here. Another one for 770. Another one for 755 over here. And here I have a $250,000 home. This $250,000 home over here, surrounded by these more expensive properties, the value of that home just went up. I'm not saying it's worth 760,000, but if you own a home that's a value of 250, and they're building homes all around you for 700,000-800,000, the value of home just went up. You did nothing. That's called progression. Now, on the other hand, we're going to talk about regression. Now, in regression, in this neighborhood, here I have a home for 370,000. I have one for 360 here, one for 355. I have another one for 365. That's a 3 over here. 365. Got another one for 370. Another one for 350. Another one for 355. But here I have a home that has a value of 950,000. This $950,000 home, surrounded by these more modest price homes, it's not worth 950. Not in that neighborhood. One of the worst listings you could take in your real estate career is the most expensive house in that neighborhood, most expensive house on that block. That's regression. Now we have the principle of substitution. Now, under the principle of substitution, the maximum value of the property tends to be set by how much it would cost to purchase an equally desirable property. Let me give you an example of that. Let me get rid of this. Let's say today you were approved by lender to purchase a home. You've been qualified by lender to purchase a home today. Guess what you're going to be doing this weekend? You'll be driving around in the neighborhood that you want to buy in and start looking at some open houses. So, so you're driving around on a Sunday afternoon in the neighborhood you want to buy in. You stop at an open house. Now, this particular open house that you stop in happens to have 4 bedrooms, has 3.5 baths, it has a full finish basement. And they're asking $495,000. You really like this neighborhood, you love this house. Problem at $495,000, it puts you at the very limit of what you could afford. I mean, if you bought this house at $495,000, you're using every last cent you have in your savings. You're not going to have anything left over. If something breaks down or emergency, you have no money. Do you want to make that sacrifice? You want to think about that. So you get in your car and you drive away. You get 2 blocks away and there's another open house. You stop at that second open house. This open house also has 4 bedrooms. It has only 2.5 baths instead of 3.5. It has a full basement. Full basement. Not finished. But they're not asking $495,000. Asking price on this one is $465,000. You know what? This gives you a little bit of breathing room. It's more in your budget. In case something breaks down, you have a little bit extra money. Take care of it. You decide to buy the second home. Now, the second home is a little bit older. Rooms are a little bit smaller. It has a basement. It's not finished. Maybe down the road you can finish off the basement. It's more in your budget. So you decide to buy that second home. That's the principle of substitution. Now, those of you out there that already own a home, why do you own that home that you live in now? Because you use the principle of substitution. If you ever search for homes on the internet, which I'm sure all of you have, you have used the principle of substitution. Now, let's say you don't live in a home, you live in an apartment. Why do you live in that apartment that you live in now? Well, for your budget, for the space that you need, location to work, or whatever it might be, you need a garage. That's why you live in that home. We all use the principle of substitution. And the last principle here is called supply and demand. Supply and demand is basic economic principle. The greater the supply of any commodity that's out there, and there's no demand, then what happens? Prices come down. Less of a demand, less of a supply, greater demand, prices go up. Price always follows demand. Now, when appraiser goes out to appraise a property, there's 3 approaches that they can use. Sometimes they might use one. They might use 2 out of the 3. They might use all 3 of them. They kind of serve as checks against each other. So the first one is at the very bottom of page 93. This is, I want you to highlight, put an X. This is called the sales comparison approach. Now, all right, let me clear this and let me explain this one to you. Sales comparison approach. Now, what also you could do on the sales comparison approach, while I am erasing this off on page 94, kind of towards the bottom, they have CBS and CPA. Stands for if the comparable is better, you subtract. Comparable is poor, you add. And it's spelled out there for you too. So let me give you an example. This is called the sales comparison approach. It's also called the market data approach. I'm going to give you an examples of things that you'll see. So, sales comparison. Sales comparison approach, also called the market data approach. Either one is correct. Data. Now, this approach is used on any existing residential property. Any existing residential property and also used on residential vacant lots. Now, CBS CPA, CBS, I want you to know this. If the comparable is better than a subject property, I'm going to give you an example in a moment, you subtract. CPA, CPA. If the comparable is poorer then you add. Now, let me tell you how this works. An appraiser wants to estimate the value of your property. Your property is called the subject property. I want to know what the value as the appraiser of the value of this property. I don't know what it is. I had to figure that out. And I use comparables or comps. They use anywhere from 3 to 5 comps. Now, what the appraiser tries to do, he tries to find he tries to find properties that are identical to yours. But he can't always find properties that are identical. He finds properties that are similar to it. So now he has to make adjustments. For example, comp or comparable number 1. It's a property that's sold for $495,000. That's what it's sold for. I found a property that's very similar to this one, but this property that I found has a swimming pool, which you do not have. Now, they're going to tell you, they're going to give you the value. They're going to say, well, the value of a swimming pool is $23,000. Now, whenever adjustments are made, they're always made on the comparables, never on the subject property. That's what I'm trying to find out, what the value of this property is. So, comparable has a swimming pool. You do not. I need to make the comparable equal to yours. So what I have to do in this case, since they have a swimming pool, you do not, I need a minus $23,000, which will give me a adjusted price, as they call it. of $472,000. Now, comp number two, comparable number two, is a property that's sold, let's say, for $440,000. Now, this property is identical to yours in every single way, except that this property has one less bedroom than yours. And they're going to give you the value of a bedroom, a bathroom, a garage, whatever it might be. And they're going to say that the value of a bedroom in this case might be $30,000. See, here's this situation. You own a 4-bedroom home. You're the subject property. You have a 4-bedroom home. Comparable is a 3-bedroom home. I need to turn a 3-bedroom into a 4-bedroom. So what do? I add 30,000. I just converted because that's the value of a bedroom. They give that number to you. So now I come up with an adjusted price. Of $470,000. So like I said, they use 3 to 5 comps and they take these numbers here. They add them all up, divide it by how many I have, and that's going to give me the value of the subject property of your property. Okay, that's the sales comparison approach. Now, let's go on to page 95. On page 95, right in the middle of the page, they talk about the cost approach. Now, the cost approach is used on any unusual type property, any unusual type property. I'm talking about any government building. I'm talking about houses of worship, churches. I'm talking about stadiums. I'm talking about courthouses. I'm talking about cemeteries. Any unusual type property, we use the cost approach. Now, the cost approach generally is going to set the upper limit. So quite often it's used for insurance purposes. What I need you to know, there are the 5 steps over here, and you can highlight and put X's by. The most important thing about using a cost approach is that you will, and the cost approach, the land is always calculated separately from the improvements, from the building or the house. Just make sure you know that. Now, on top of page 96, the first couple of lines, there are 2 ways to look at construction costs of a building for appraisal purpose using a cost approach. Highlight, put an X by number 1 and 2. Number 1 is reproduction. Number 2 is replacement. Reproduction means you built an exact duplicate using the same material they used originally. Whereas replacement use modern building materials. It just has the same usefulness. Now, let's take what do you think is more expensive, reproduction or replacement? Reproduction. Let me give you an example. Let's take a church that was built 500 years ago. If that church was burned down, reproduction means you're going to use the same material that they used 500 years ago. They're going to use the same craftsmanship as they used 500 years ago to build this church. That's reproduction. Replacement, they use cinder blocks, fake stained glass. It's just a building that has the same usefulness. So reproduction is a lot more expensive. Now, determining reproduction and replacement costs. You can highlight these 3 bullets. The square foot method, that's part of the one that we had on a previous page. The square foot method is where the land is calculated separately from the improvements. The second one is called the unit in place method. You're building a 1,000-room hotel. You're building a hospital, an 800-bed hospital. What does each room cost? You multiply how many rooms you're going to build, add a profit for a builder, And that tells you approximately what it's going to cost to build. That's a unit in place method. Then we have the quantity survey method, which kind of shows up a little bit more often. The only one that can figure this one out would be an architect. So let's say you have some blueprints to build a home. You bring them over to your architect. Look, I am going to go to Home Depot next week. I need to buy my supplies to build this home. What do I need to buy? Well, this is where the architect comes in and figures it out. An architect will, what they do is they will figure out exactly what you need in materials. How many tons of brick? How many yards of cement? How many 2x4s, 2x12s? How many windows, doors? How many sheets of rock? How many roofing squares? How many nails? How many screws? How many gallons of paint? Here's Sam. Here's your list. Go ahead and do your shopping. Now, depreciation. I want you can highlight the next couple of lines under depreciation. In real estate appraisal, depreciation is the loss of value due to any cause compared with today's cost of replacement. Now, you see that very next paragraph? I want you to highlight and put an X by the next 4 words. Land does not depreciate. I want you to remember that. Land does not depreciate. At least on a state exam, it does not depreciate. Highlight, put an X by the last paragraph. Depreciation can be curable or incurable. Curable means you can fix it and it's economically feasible to fix. Incurable, it's not worthwhile to fix. Now, the last couple lines here, physical deterioration, which I want you to highlight that first paragraph on the next page here on 97. That's physical deterioration. Highlight, put an X by that one. The next paragraph where it says functional obsolescence, and 2 paragraphs down where it says external obsolescence. Now, I want you to be familiar with all 3 of them. Actually, I'm going to draw these out for you. The reason is some of you out there right now, students, will see maybe all 3 of these on your state exam. Most of you will get at least 2. I guarantee every single one of you are going to get 1. So let me go over them and make sure you understand them. The first one is called physical deterioration, also called physical depreciation. Physical deterioration. Oh, excuse me, I had a sneeze. Sorry. Physical deterioration. Oh, another one. Sorry about that. I don't know if we can edit that out. I hope they can. Physical deterioration, also called physical depreciation, is it's a loss of value to the property caused by wear, tear, and neglect. Physical deterioration, also called physical depreciation. It's a loss of value to the property caused by wear, tear, and neglect. For example, the roof on your home is leaking. You need to replace your roof, but you don't. Instead, you go out and buy a bunch of buckets to catch the water that's leaking in. Bucket gets full, you dump them out. But you're causing more damage to the structure by ignoring that problem. That's physical deterioration. The next one is called functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence. So hard to write with this thing. Functional obsolescence is a loss of value to the property. Caused by out of date, being out of date. Or out of style, being out of style. Being not functional, unfunctional. An example. I'll give you a couple of examples. Having a warehouse, having a faulty design. You have a warehouse, 10-story warehouse, but the way this thing was built, every 10 feet you have a support pillar that's 3 feet wide. It's taking up a lot of the warehouse space. Not very functional. I saw this. I'll give you a couple of other examples. You own a home. It has 12 rooms, 5 bedrooms, and only 1 bathroom. Functional obsolescence. Who's going to buy a 5-bedroom home? A large family. 1 bathroom, it's not going to work. Functional obsolescence. Having no garage in a large home. Functional obsolescence. Now, the next one is called external. These are all forms of depreciation, by the way. External obsolescence, also called external depreciation. Obsolescence. Is a loss of value to the property my time. I got time. Loss of value to the property beyond the owner's control. Beyond the owner's control. Let me give you an example. You own a home. When the roof was leaking on your home, you replaced the roof. When you added bedrooms, you added bath. You did everything right, but the value of home has gone down beyond your control. Because where you live right now, someone sold that empty lot right next door to your property, and they're going to build a all night bar that's going to be open, to 4 in the morning every night. And on the other side of you, they someone bought that property over there, and it's a old house. And what they're doing with that one is it's a motorcycle club that bought that house over there, and whatever's going on, the activity going on in that area too. Maybe someone bought that building right across the street from you, and they're gonna build maybe they're gonna build a factory over there that's gonna produce lead-based paint, and those lead particles gonna be distributed through the air. And the back of your lot, well, the state bought that. They're gonna put a new highway over there that's gonna run right against your property, a high-speed highway. You did everything right, but beyond your control, your property just lost value. So make sure you're familiar with all three of these. Now, let's go on to the last one. This is called the income approach. Still on page 97, a little bit past halfway there, the income approach. Now, the income approach is used on any income producing property. So, like you to highlight, put X by those first couple lines on their income approach. Income approach of value is based on the present value of the rights to future income. That income's generated. Now, there are 5 steps in determining the value of a property. So I like you to highlight, put an X by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 4 and 5 are on the next page. Now, what I'm going to show you right now is just a little bit of, I'm going to show you exactly what you need, which isn't much. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know what you need to know for the test. But if you're going to be working with investors, you got to spend a little bit more time and understand this a little bit better than what I'm doing right here. I'm giving you enough just for the test, which is fine. So these are the steps that you need to know. First of all, because investors know about this, I had to, number one is I had to figure out what is the annual gross income on a property. The annual gross income. Meaning if my building was rented 100% of the time, what's my total income? I'm going to put that dollar amount here. Now, no building's rented 100% of the time. No building's rented. You will have a vacancy. So you take your vacancy factor, you minus your vacancy, and that's going to equal what we call your effective gross income. Now we have our expenses. Your expenses will include property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, utilities, scavenger, any expenses you have on this property, on the building. And we minus our expenses, which is going to equal what we call our net, or it's also called NOI, net operating income. your gross income minus your vacancy, it gives you your effective gross income minus your expenses, will give you your net operating income. Now we have what's called your capitalization rate or cap rate. Oops, capitalization. Rate, which is a percent that you divide that percent into the NOI, and that's going to equal the value of the property. Basically, there's two formulas you need to know. You take your you take the NOI, write it over here. NOI divided by your cap rate equals the value. That's the main formula you need to know. Sometimes they're going to have you figure out what is the cap rate. So then you take your NOI divided by what the property sold for, or the value of what it might be, and that's going to equal the cap rate. Now, what I'm going to do, let me put some numbers here. Maybe it'll make a little bit more sense to you. So, back in. Okay, let's say your annual gross income happens to be $480,000. Okay. You have a vacancy factor. Minus your vacancy, say it's 20,000. Will give me my effective gross income of 460,000. Now we have our expenses. Again, your taxes, your insurance, your repairs, maintenance, management fee, all your expenses. Let's say they came out to minus 190,000, which will give me my net or my NOI of 270,000. So now we take our cap rate. Let's say our cap rate's 8%. So I take 8%, I divide 8% into the $270,000, and the value of the property comes out to $3,375,000. $3,375,000. Now, this is how investors buy property. See, I'm the investor. Let's say you're the investor. I'm your real estate agent. I show you this property, and this property's on the market for $4 million. You know, it's way overpriced. You know, you're not even going to call me anymore. I mean, I don't even know what I'm doing. Now, if this was on the market for like 3.4 million, 3.3 million, you're going to say, Sam, property looks good. Tell you what, why don't we set up an appointment to go and look at this next week? Now, If this property was on the market for $2.5 million, you're going to call me up right away. Sam, hurry up. Meet me at the building. Bring a contract with you. I have my checkbook because they know it's a value. People buy homes based on emotion. They love the bay window. They love the chandelier. They love the woodwork. They love the fireplace. When people buy investment property, they're basing it on a bottom line. Which property is going to give me a better return on my investment? Now, let's say that I don't like this particular neighborhood. Say I don't like this neighborhood. I don't think there's a lot of appreciation here. So what I want, instead of an 8% cap rate, what I want is a 10% cap rate. Because I don't think there's much appreciation in this area. So now, if I take 10% and divide it into the NOI, I'm going to come up with a value of only $2,700,000. See, the higher the cap rate means I want more money for myself, the less I have to pay for the property. Now, let's say I like this neighborhood. I see a lot of potential. You know what? I don't need 10%. I don't need 8%. You know what? I'll be happy with a 6.5% cap rate. So I take 270,000 divided by 6.5%. And now the value I'm willing to pay more for comes out to 4,153,000 because I see a lot of potential in this area. That's how investors buy property. Now, almost done with this chapter. Watching my clock because I got another class is coming up. Now, towards the bottom, page 98, or yeah, the third paragraph on the bottom, it says gross rent multiplier. I'd like you to highlight, put an X by that. GRM, gross rent multiplier. GRM stands for gross rent multiplier. This is just a very quick way of guesstimating the value of a property. Not very accurate because they're not very detailed. A lot of times this is used for a smaller income producing property, like a single storefront, or maybe a 1-bedroom condo that you own, you use the GRM. The formula is you take the monthly rent now, and you multiply it by the GRM. And that's going to equal the value. So let me give you an example of a problem. Let's say the rent. Now pay attention to what I'm doing over here. People will make a mistake on this. The rent is $18,000 a year. The GRM is 90. Question is, what's the value of the property? Now you got to pay attention to what I'm doing here. See, because the GRM is based on the monthly rent. They give you the problem on a state exam that the rent is $18,000 a year. 18,000 divided by 12 months equals $1,500 a month. Times 90, the value is 135,000. I tell you what the problem is. People forget to do the monthly rent. They take the yearly rent. In this case, if you took 18,000 times 90, you're going to get a value of $1,620,000. Be careful of that. Now, let's go on to page 99. about a quarter of the way down, the appraisal process, they say, although appraisal is not an exact science, all it is gathering information, analyzing this information, and then writing up your report. There are two types of information that they gather. Number one is general data. General data is information about the community, what type of housing, where's the park, the beach, the school, the metro line, the red line, the hospital, the grocery shopping. So it's just information about the community. Then number two, they get specific data, and that's on the property, the square footage, the condition of the walls, how the kitchen is updated, the landscaping. Then they turn in their report. Now, I talked about three approaches that an appraiser use: sales comparison, cost, and income. Again, appraiser might use one out of the three. They might use two out of the three. They might use all three. It's called reconciliation. It kind of serves as checks against each other. In fact, the first paragraph on page 100, reconciliation. Highlight, put an X by that one. And that is the end of chapter 7, the appraisal chapter. Again, make sure you do the chapter quizzes. Keep up with your chapter quizzes. Again, if you're not sure about any of the questions, ask your instructor, or you can email the school and their send that to me and I'll help you out with that. So until I see you next time, keep on studying and get this work done. Thank you very much.